Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
What's the origin of modern pharmaceuticals? What were the options before dealing with disease prior to the current medications? Could there be critical wisdom we left behind? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore traditional plant medicine is Robert Rogers. Robert is a professional member of the American Herbalist Guild with over 50 years of experience. He's the author of over 60 books on plants and fungi. He has taught plant medicine for 26 years at both college and university level and has a clinical practice for over 20 years. He's the author of over 20 peer-reviewed papers for clinical professor in family medicine at the University of Alberta. He's also a fellow of the International College of Nutrition. His website, selfhealdistributing.com. Robert, thank you for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Oh, you're welcome. Nice to be here.
So I understand you're an herbalist. Where'd you get your training?
Well, my training began basically in the early 70s when there weren't a lot of herbal schools. So I'm partly self-taught and partly went to a few colleges. One of my first instructors, I went to a conference in Alert Bay in British Columbia with Norma Myers, and a traditional healer. And then California, England, Spain. And I did a 2-year apprenticeship in Peru back in the early 80s. And then I started my first clinical practice in 1984 in Edmonton, Alberta.
How did it go over so early? I mean, in 84, that was a while back. How did it go over?
Well, I was the only herbalist in the whole city, so that helped a bit. and the fact that I helped a few people, and then I would help. Then word would spread to their neighbors or to their relatives, and my practice first really was heavy with regards to people from Eastern European ancestry. From Germany, Poland, areas where herbal medicine was considered just the time of day. Whereas in North America, it really, in the early 70s, it was almost extinct, and it just became revived again. And today, of course, it's blossoming, but there were times there where it was not really well accepted. Yeah.
So is a comprehensive knowledge of the human body critical for effective herbalism?
Absolutely. You should know, I would say anatomy is somewhat secondary, but physiology is absolutely imperative. You have to have a background and know how the whole body is interrelated. And I think that's really important. And when I used to teach my classes, that was the first thing we would zero in on as physiology. Yeah.
So the physiology that they teach at the college level now, is it the same kind of physiology one would need, or is there something more needed for herbology?
Well, when I began, I went early 70s. I was in pre-med at the. My mom thought I should be a medical doctor, and I didn't. But the physiology then hasn't changed much. It's still, biomedicine is really still a very biomechanical approach to the body. That is, that the heart is a pump. And, we often forget that it has the ability to release up to 8 different hormones that adjust the beat and the temperature and the way that the body responds. So it's more than just a pump. That's for sure. Yeah.
I was thinking our physiology is a little limited.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote a holistic physiology course about 20 years ago, and it's probably, outdated today. Things are changing so much.
Well, I hope it's a good change. That's all I've got to say. So what degree did your studies incorporate the biology portion?
Yeah, so I finally graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Botany, and that led me to I went on a quick trip with a good friend who's passed, but we hitchhiked through North and South America for a while, and then I came back, and six of my friends had bought a little quarter section of land in northern Alberta on a large lake called Lesser Slave Lake, and I went up there and I was shocked because I had a degree in botany and I didn't know one plant in the forest, not one. And and so that began my studies, and I had an interest always in how plants can help healing. And I was fortunate that on either side of the piece of land where I was living were two indigenous healers, one a woman and one a man. And I began to learn from them. I would hang out and learn some of the plants locally. And then later on, I became fascinated with the idea that traditional knowledge, very, very interesting, and a need to preserve it. And then, of course, how is the chemistry in the plants? How are they actually working? And why did those plants work the way they worked? And so I found that fascinating. Yeah.
So were your teachers original Canadians?
Yes, the two that were in my original were Rose Auger. She was a Cree medicine woman, and Russell Willier, who actually many years later, Dr. David Young, who I knew quite well from the University of Alberta. I used to go in and teach a class for him in fourth year ethnobotany, and ethnomedicinal properties. And the three of us wrote a book that came out in 2016 called A Cree Healer and His Medicine Bundle. And why I liked it was that very few Indigenous healers, many of them have passed on now, would not want to share their secrets of how plant medicines work for them, which is unfortunate, I think. But anyways, he did. And so we wrote that book, and luckily it's been very well received. Yeah.
I would imagine. I would imagine. My original teacher told me something, and I want to run it by you. He was Lakota, and he said that plants know what you need, and every year they're different because every year is different, and therefore you will be different.
How true that is. Yeah, I can relate to that. Absolutely. When I lived in Peru, I would often engage with the local Indigenous healers there. And I say, well, how do you know that that plant does what it does? And they would look at me like I was some kind of, a little Dumbo. And they would say, well, the plant told me.
Exactly. It tells me.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah. If
I
you're
want in
listening.
on that. I want in on that. How does it tell you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you really first become drawn to herbology?
I think I was drawn to it because as a child, when I was 6 years old, I was living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and my uncle came back from the Korean War. And unbeknownst to our family, he moved in with us and he had tuberculosis. And unfortunately, fortunately, I was the only one who actually became infected. The other members of the family escaped a little better than I did. But, through a series of, treatments and whatever, I also discovered this part of myself that I didn't know later what it really meant. My mom used to have all these canning jars under the porch, and I would fill them with water and then take flower petals from the garden and put them in the bottles and then put them in the sun and then drink the water. And
So you're
only
making
about
infusions, right?
exactly like a
Yeah.
flower essence.
Uh-huh.
And only about 15 years later, I discovered that actually I was treating myself with flower essence therapy. Yes. So yeah. So I started young. Yeah.
Apparently. So what prompted you to do that? Just
No
Where'd you get
idea.
that information?
Yeah. They often say when you're around 6 to 7 years old that somehow you are given a gift of knowing what your passion in life is. And I think I was fortunate that way. Yeah.
Life purpose, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
So how old is herbology?
Uh, as old as people have been on the planet, I would say. People have, I would say to my herbal students, I said, at the end of 3 years with time with me, I hope you could be popped onto a desert island summers and you would be able to pick up a plant that you don't know the name of, but by smelling it, tasting it, and experiencing it, you would be able to tell what body system it would be good for. And so I think, long ago, individuals learned by trial and error. And then, of course, the idea needed to be spread, and this was before written language, that people would somehow pass on that information. Often it was in the form of, actually in the days when healer religious leaders were also the healers and the captains, so to speak, of the different institutions, and they would actually pass on this knowledge to their heirs, and so on and so on. So, how it really began, who knows in the end. But bottom line, plants have been part of healing for millennium. Yeah.
How about instinct? I know there's this one cancer treatment that's been around for quite a while that a gentleman made the remedy by watching a horse that had been put out to pasture because he was riddled with cancer and was going to die. And he started eating weird, grazing on strange plants that he normally wouldn't graze on, and cured himself. And so then the gentleman, the farmer, went out and followed him around and saw what he was eating and made a formula out of that. And I don't think that's an isolated case. There's a lot of instances where animals have the instinct to eat the plants that they normally wouldn't eat, and it treats whatever they've got.
Yeah, there's a great book out by Cindy Engel called Wild Health, and she follows animals around the world. This is about 20 years old, I think, this book now. We're showing everything from chimpanzees to other animals self-medicating themselves. And one of the stories I found really fascinating was they took a bunch of chickens, and they took the grain that they fed them, and part of them they sprinkled with antibiotics, and then the other they just left alone. And initially the chickens all ate both, rapidly, like just eating away. And pretty soon, 99% of the chickens were only eating the untreated grain. And then when they actually killed the chickens that were eating the antibiotic grain, they found that they were ill.
Go figure. Well, it's time for us to take a station break. Robert and I will be back very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. We're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net.
Are you ready to dive into the mysteries of the unknown? Tune into the electrifying X Zone radio TV show hosted by the one and only Rob McConnell.
I'm Rob McConnell, and get ready for a mind-bending journey through the unexplained phenomenon that surrounds us all. From UFO encounters to cryptids, ghosts, and everything in between, we've got it covered here in the X Zone.
Rob McConnell, the seasoned investigator and renowned radio personality, brings you the most compelling interviews with top experts, authors, and experiencers from around the world. Each episode is an unforgettable exploration into the depths of the extraordinary.
That's right, X Zone Nation. Join me every week as we open the door to the supernatural and explore the strange and amazing stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew.
And it's not just radio anymore. With our groundbreaking TV show, You can now witness the sessions unfold right before your eyes. From chilling reenactments to captivating visuals, prepare yourself for a multimedia experience like never before.
With a legacy spanning over 2 decades, the X-Zone Radio and TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, is your ultimate source for mind-blowing entertainment and thought-provoking discussions. Join our growing community of truth seekers as we continue to unlock the world's mysteries.
So, why wait? Step into the X-Zone and embark on a journey that will challenge your beliefs, ignite your curiosity, and keep you on the edge of your seat.
Remember, X-Zone Nation, the truth is out there, and it's waiting for you right here on the X-Zone Radio and TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't miss a minute of the action.
Tune in now on your favorite radio station or visit xzoneradiotv.com to join the adventure. The X-Zone Radio TV show with Rob McConnell, where reality meets the unknown.
The X-Zone Radio TV show, unraveling the secrets of the universe, one episode at a time. For more information, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com.
Where do herbs and pharmaceuticals meet? With us this hour discussing modern-day herbology is Robert Rogers, the author of Medicinal Lichens, Traditional Knowledge, and Modern Pharmacology. Robert, do some of our pharmaceuticals have origins in herbs?
The molecules that are in plants have been widely used by pharmaceuticals, probably 40% at least by estimation. But there is often a misnomer. It often is people will say things like, oh, well, aspirin was discovered in willow bark or something like that. But the physiology doesn't prove that out really. Aspirin actually is made from coal tar. It's not had nothing to do with the plant, and it reacts differently in your body. So, like for example, I'll give an example. For example, chronic arthritis. The inner bark of willow containing salicin, dried and then prepared into a decoction, into a tea, and drank, will go through the esophagus, the stomach, without causing a stomach bleed. This is important because everybody who takes an aspirin has a stomach bleed of some sort or another. And then it goes down into the intestine, worked on by the healthy bacteria that we have in our intestine, of course, and then conjugated to the liver and released about 14 hours later into the bloodstream as salicylic acid, which is a great anti-inflammatory, so, but it takes that amount of time, whereas aspirin is often taken and it works almost instantly, for a headache or something of that nature. And so even though the molecule was found in plants, it's a different approach to health. Yes.
So is there something lost in the translation, if you will, when we start to synthesize the constituent parts that were in herbs? And is there a certain checks and balances that some of those constituent parts that we've filtered out serve?
Yeah, I would say they do. I mean, some plants may have up to 600 or more actually compounds that actually give some kind of a balance to the so-called unquote active ingredient, that is preventing it from going too far in one particular direction. And one of my favorite things in the last 25 years has been looking at medicinal mushrooms, which are what they call immune modulators. That is, if the immune system is not functioning optimally, they will help boost up, produce your white blood cell count up. But if also at the same time, if you suffer from an autoimmune condition like rheumatoid arthritis, for example, it will damp down that response that is actually destroying your own tissue. So in that way, it's an immune modulator, and they're anti-inflammatory. And there's nothing in the medical world like that.
So that goes back to our earlier discussion about how the environment, nature, good old Mother Nature, produces what we need when we need it in the proportions that we need it. Because we're all in this soup together, right? Every season is different, and our needs are different every season.
Well, it's true. I mean, look at how many people spray a toxin on their lawns to get rid of dandelions, which are one of the great, great herbs of all parts of it are just amazing medicine. And yet people spend a lot of time and money and endanger their health trying to get rid of them. So yes, there's an example.
Well, you don't want a wildcraft out of your lawn, then, do you?
No, exactly.
So, what happens to the effectiveness of medications that have isolated the constituents from the whole? Is that where side effects come from?
Yeah, they're predictable side effects, and they're because the action is usually unidirectional. That is, they're meant to do one thing in a certain direction, and they do work well that way. The trouble is that over time your body gets used to that influence, and it can be harmful. For example, a lot of people take Tylenol, which is a very common over-the-counter medication for pain and whatever. But pain is a teacher. Like if you have pain on a constant basis or inflammation in your body, you should be checking out why, not just suppressing the pain. I think that's one of the places where herbal medicine and biomedicine part is that biomedicine thinks there needs to be an intervention with some kind of a drug or surgery or whatever, whereas in the natural health world, there's a belief that the body has the intrinsic ability to heal itself. And so there is that difference. And I don't think the twains will ever meet, actually.
Oh, I hope they do at some point.
I hope. I spent 30 years on committees and at university level, family medicine, on many, many decades I put into hoping there would be a degree of integrative medicine in North America. And there's very little suggestion that we're making much progress, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, right now, our doctors get their education from the drug companies, basically. That's all they have time for is have the drug reps come and tell them what the latest, greatest is, and here's some samples. They,
Well,
they
that's
don't
the
have time for anything
unfortunate.
else.
Yeah. And I think there is a bit of a pushback from younger medical doctors that they don't want to be so cozy with the drug companies. And yet that is what their training consists of. I mean, I remember I was on a committee that we were trying to introduce 2 days of nutrition into the 3-year medical training, and they couldn't find room for the 2 days, if you know what I mean.
And you are what you eat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I understand some herbs do have side effects. Do they overall tend to have some less than drugs?
Well, some of them are, like I say, predictable and usually is associated with dosage. I think it's really important that people who look at taking herbal medicine, they understand that, especially some of the more alkaloid-rich herbs, they can be dangerous, and you need to, be specific. But a lot of herbs are more tonic, and they tend to, over time, just increase the efficacy and strength of different body systems. But yeah, you have to be careful, and certainly herbal drug interactions. And I've written books on the topic. That can be really can be somewhat serious, particularly with cardiovascular risk. People who are taking drugs for conditions like ACE inhibitors or taking something for hypertension or cholesterol, et cetera, they should be very cautious about what herbs they take at the same time. Absolutely.
It's interesting because I think there's this misunderstanding that, oh, well, if it's an herb or a vitamin, it's safe, and people don't tend to look at where it's not safe, what dosage needs to be, or what it can't mix with as far as drugs go.
Right.
Yeah. So herbs and vitamins are two different things. Would you just describe the difference, please?
Yeah, well, herbs are plants, and they're extracted in different methods, and some are, certainly you want to be looking at organic sources of plant material, But vitamins are generally put together by the 5 major pharmaceutical companies in North America. They provide all of the different ingredients for these vitamin companies that put them together in different ratios. And I'm much more a fan of eating whole foods than I am of taking a vitamin pill, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Well, a lot of times I say, well, if you have this vitamin is going to be good. Or if you have that vitamin is going to be good. However, as I understand it, vitamins only do good if you're deficient in them.
Exactly. And if you're deficient in them, your best source is food. There are some exceptions. I used to find, for example, in some cases that, a supplementation for a period of time with B6 or sometimes with a mixed tocopherol vitamin E or something like that would be beneficial. But unless people actually did the effort to change their diet, to change the way they think about their relationship with food, usually that was the bottom line. That's usually what made the difference.
Does it come down to absorption?
Partially, yeah. I would say I had many cases where people would come in and show me that the supplement they were taking came right through their whole body, undissolved. And so, yeah, I would say that because oftentimes tablets would have a certain type of shellac type coating on them to make them glide smoothly and glide right through. So
Glide right on through.
yeah. So I'm much more. I prefer liquids but eat your whole foods. I love, for example, I love sprouts and I love microgreens because these are foods that are vital and they just have everything in them and at the beginning of life. And so those are superfoods I consider. Yeah.
Which brings me to another topic: live food versus dead and preserved food, or live herbs versus ones that have been dried and encapsulated. What's the difference there?
That's a great question too. Well, dead food, we know what that's all about, and there's aisles of it in the grocery stores. That's the part of the grocery store I stay away from. The difference between live herbs and dried herbs, that's controversial to some degree. The bottom line is herbs for centuries, the only ones that were available were dried. I mean, the word drug actually means dried herb. That's where it came from originally, drug. And so that was the only way to preserve them, was to pick them and dry them and whatever. Although, in Europe, for example, Benedictine monks and other people in the monasteries, they would make these elixirs or wine tonics using fresh herbs from their monastery gardens. And even today, if I have my druthers and I teach my students this way, I would say there's about 80% of the herbs that are from my part of the world, which is Northern Canada. If the herbs are actually taken fresh and then produced into a fresh tincture, that is using a high quality alcohol, organic alcohol, you can't beat that. That is some of the best medicine that you can actually get from plants. Yeah.
So are you talking about wildcrafting?
I am. So wildcrafting is a big part of what my students do in this part of the world. And in general, bioregional herbalism all over the world is really the way to go. I often think, in Northern Canada, why would I want a herb who knows how old from Australia or China or South Africa when a plant that does the same thing is right outside my back door? And so, yeah.
Does the wisdom of choosing local things because you're local, does that apply there?
I think so. I think there's something to that. And particularly the more you look, for example, over the years, I think in my area, there's only about 1,200 herbaceous plants in Alberta. That's it. That's not many. And I know about 600, about half of them quite well. And they cover every possible organ system issue or metabolic condition that you could possibly think of. And and they're right there for people to take advantage of, or that they can certainly plant in their backyard. Yeah.
And it's probably limited how many people there are versus how many wild growing ones are, but planting in your backyard makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's time for us to take a station break. Robert and I will be right back to continue our discussion. Please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net.
Are you ready for a tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat? Get ready to dive into the gripping memoir by Bart Sibrel titled Moon Man. Bart Sibrel takes you on a heart-pounding journey, unmasking the truth behind America's famous Apollo missions. Prepare yourself for hair-raising encounters with agents from the U.S. government's top-secret agencies. In Moon Man, Sibrel fearlessly reveals his real-life espionage adventures, shining a light on one of the CIA's best-kept secrets. Brace yourself for shocking revelations, including Sibrel's discovery of privately recorded audio exposing an Apollo astronaut's chilling plot, a plot orchestrated by the CIA. That's right. As Sibrel unveils this groundbreaking evidence, it becomes clear that there is much more to the Apollo missions than meets the eye. Could it be that we've been deceived all along? Moon Man is a gripping page-turner that challenges everything you thought you knew. It's a mind-bending journey into the unknown, where the line between truth and fiction becomes blurred. Don't miss this opportunity to uncover the secrets hidden for decades. Let your curiosity guide you as you join Bart Sibrel on his quest to find the truth. Moon Man, available now at Sibrel.com. That's Sibrel.com. Prepare to have your beliefs shaken to the very core.
Mushrooms. Are we in Wonderland? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the health benefits of herbs is Robert Rogers. His website is selfhealdistributing.com. Robert, how did you become interested in mushrooms and lichens?
That's a great question. Well, about a short time into my clinical herbal practice, I was getting referrals to people who were coming with, who were considering oncology. They were considering the fact that they had a cancer of different types, and their oncologist was suggesting chemotherapy. And I didn't know a lot at the time, but I do did know that there were two mushrooms from around the world, turkey tail and reishi, which had been showing significant benefit in keeping their immune systems optimal while they were going through chemotherapy, which is a very toxic drug, basically. And so that's how I became introduced to the idea. And so I would suggest those, and they would talk to their oncologist, and they would say, no, you can't take any supplements while you're doing oncology, which is actually scientifically untrue. It's not true. In fact, I wrote a book a number of years ago that basically shows that several hundred human double-blind placebo-controlled trials showing mushrooms not only alleviate the side effects of chemotherapy, such as, hair loss, the appetite problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but also improve longevity. And so that definitely is an incorrect scientific statement from oncologists. So then I joined a local mushroom club around Edmonton, and discovered that a lot of the medicinal mushrooms were right within 100 kilometers of the city I was living in. And that got me kind of interested. And I wrote in the early 2000s, I wrote a little pamphlet on medicinal mushrooms. Then I self-published a book in 2006 on medicinal mushrooms of Western Canada, which was kind of limiting my audience. And then later on, a larger tome, which has become quite popular and gets me around the world, looking at, about 230 medicinal mushrooms and how they're beneficial for just about every kind of condition out there. So, yeah, there's no question about them. They are, what I love too, are mushrooms can also, some of them are food. Like your button mushrooms that you buy in the store, or oysters, or enokis, or shiitake, one of my favorite edibles. They're all extremely beneficial to you, and you can make them part of your regular diet.
I love morels. I go out every year to find those morels.
I often get skunked, but when I do find them, I'm kind of happy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting more rare. Um, are there any studies done on mushrooms as helping with cancer sans the chemotherapy?
Absolutely. With chemo or without?
Without it, just mushrooms
Yeah,
helping with cancer.
so that's a great question. So none of the mushroom polysaccharides, which basically these beta glucans, which nudge your immune system to optimal work, none of them actively kill cancer cells. But what they do is they optimize your T cells, your B cells, and others that actually work indirectly to lower cancer cell counts in the body and prevent them from what they call, or encourage them to do what is called apoptosis, or self-programmed death. Like an optimal immune system will actually examine every cell in your body, and if it's a little aberrant, it will maybe let it go or not. But at a certain point, if it's optimal, it'll say, you're out of here. We're going to recycle this cell. And that's how cancers are eliminated in the body. Yeah.
I understand we all have cancer at any given time, but the body just takes care of it.
That's correct. If you're particularly, there's a gateway called P53, which is you can buy a book on that. It's like a snooze fest, but very interesting in that it's a place where the final decision is made if they let this cell go or not. And and medicinal mushrooms often optimize the function of those P, et cetera, kind of gateways. And yeah, that's how it works. Medicinal mushrooms to prevent cancers, way more effective than other. Now, having said that, if you take medicinal mushrooms during chemotherapy or after, like I say, it optimizes your ability to have decent white blood cell count and recover quickly afterwards. And so you can use them both ways. But if it would depend on your belief system with regards to chemotherapy. It's a heavy hammer, right? Yeah.
Sometimes we need a heavy hammer,
Sometimes you do.
but then you clean up
Sometimes
the
you
mess
do.
on the other side, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's also, males sometimes when they get 70 years old will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. And sometimes those are rapidly growing and need to be addressed. And others, you may live till 90 and still have prostate cancer and nothing else, you die of something else. So it really depends on dealing properly with your biomedical doctor or oncologist and figuring out what's best for you. Yeah.
And fortunately, there's a lot more functional medicine people out there that are willing to look at the combination of the herbs and the traditional medicines,
That's
the drugs.
exactly. Well, yeah, I think functional medicine people, I mean, we need more of them, actually. It's like for the population we have, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are lichens?
What's lacking?
No, what are lichens?
Oh, what are lichens? Okay. Well,
Or lacking, you can
lichen,
go there.
yeah. Well, lichens are very interesting symbiotic. Initially, it was thought they were just a combination of fungi, which gave structure to them, and algae, which are able to photosynthesize. That is, they contain the chlorophyll that actually allows to generate energy. And so, when some of the early chloroplasts came out of the fresh waters when the Earth was young, in order to go onto the volcanic rock, they needed a structure to survive. And so the two got together, and there's a good joke about this, actually. Annie Algae and Freddie Fungus met each other, and they got together, and then they got married. But now it's on the rocks.
Oh,
It's a
Robert.
bad joke. But basically that's what they are. And only about not even 10 years ago, a really brilliant guy, Toby, who works, he's on my alma mater at the University of Alberta. He discovered that there's 3 and 4 different types of bacteria in there and other compounds that they're all living commensally together, and they form these communities which help them survive and thrive. And so they are amazing. And what interests me about them is a couple of things. One is that a number of them have compounds in them that are very highly effective for a number of our severe chronic illnesses like cancer and diabetes and respiratory conditions, et cetera, et cetera. But they also have compounds in them that are synergistic with some of these antibiotics that no longer work well because of resistance that has taken place. That is, we have a lot of drug-resistant bacteria, and there's about 5 or 6 of them that are killing people every day in hospitals because the antibiotics no longer work. And synergistically, some of these lichens, when they're combined with what would be considered antibiotics past their prime, they actually increase their efficacy by 10 times or 30 times, or in one case, 700 times more powerful. And so I like the idea that natural compounds can be combined with existing antibiotics to help this really serious health epidemic that we're facing. Because drug companies are not spending a lot of money on antibiotics. There's more money in lifestyle drugs and things like that. And so, unfortunately, as was predicted when Fleming discovered penicillin, he said, eventually these will not work anymore because they're overused.
Oh,
And
interesting. What a prophet.
yeah. I mean, people go in with a viral cold infection, insisting they get an antibiotic. And now, fortunately, doctors are telling them, no, you don't need an antibiotic. But for years, this
antibiotic doesn't touch a virus, does it?
Exactly. And so that's what's gotten us to this point, as well as the fact that 80% of the antibiotics produced are fed to animals that go into our meat supply, like into our chickens, into our beef, et cetera, and our pork. So that's where the resistance has come from. the
Because it
overuse of antibiotics. And so
so we still even though it was given to the animal, you are what you ate, right? So
exactly,
you're getting the antibiotics from the meat.
you're getting that template, which actually encourages you to have no resistance anymore to that antibiotic. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. And then there's do the lichens, how do they treat your gut lining? I know that antibiotics can be problematic with your digestive system.
Well, they can be. One of the things that I like to look at is some of the traditional uses. When I wrote a book about this subject, traditional knowledge. How did indigenous healers in North America use these lichens? And then you look at what they were used for. Was they used for example, a common name for one is called lungwort, right? Wort being a name for plant, and lung, yeah. And those were used basically for respiratory problems, everything from, minor cold, flu, asthma, et cetera, pneumonia. And, in some cases, helping to moisten up a really dried lung condition or irritated condition. That's interesting. But then when you look at the chemistry of those lichens, why they work the way they work, that fascinates me. I guess I like to have a foot in both worlds. I like to know why it worked as well. Yeah.
Does knowing why it worked help you choose which one to give your clients?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a little secret of herbal medicine. It's like, if you're talking about, let's say, respiratory system, is the condition that the client has, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it stimulating? Is it relaxing? So you take those six into account, and then you pick those three. What's happening with those three things, and then you pick the herb that does the opposite. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's really actually quite simple once you get down to it. Yeah.
Pretty fascinating. Well, just about time for another station break. On the other side of it, though, I'd like to get further into how do we pick which one works?
Well,
Please, please stay with us as Robert and I continue to explore the role of herbs in modern day health. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. We're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Do herbs have a place in modern medicine? This
I
is
believe
Mission
they do.
Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Robert Rogers. His website, selfhealedistributing.com. And Robert, how do you interface with the medical community? How would you like to see that happening?
Well, I'd like to see more forgiveness and leeway on both sides. I mean, very often I had a lot of when I had a clinical practice, I had a number of friends who were medical doctors, and so we we could actually converse very well and send people back and forth. But I think where things really need to change is that back in the day, there used to be pharmacognosy workshops were given at the university level to pharmacists who really know more about drugs than medical doctors, really. And I think instituting an idea where people have the opportunity to choose one or the other can be helpful. And I also find, for example, the German model, where where about 30% of the prescription drugs there are both herbal and synthetic, work way more efficiently than just the synthetic alone.
Oh,
And
so
so
they mix them into the pill?
they do, and they're on
Oh,
prescription, and you can go in and depending on your preference, the practitioner will help you direct you in that direction, right? So yeah.
does that help with some of the side effects that we were
Well,
talking
it
about
does.
earlier?
It does, because you get, again, you're getting the active ingredient, but you're also getting the buffering agents associated with the herbal, which are synergistic. For example, in France, there are over 10,000 medical doctors who take a 3-year further training in aromatherapy. That is the use of essential oils for treating chronic conditions. Whole wings of hospitals are set up that way. And we don't have anything like that in North America.
I know eons ago when I was in the hospital in Switzerland, kind of grew up there, went to school there. They were using essential oils in the hospital there. And I came back here and you couldn't even find them to buy to use yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you usually become something that you put in a massage oil or something in North America, right? Yeah.
or chemicals that you put on,
Yeah. Right.
too. So, are essential oils considered in part of herbology?
Well, they are a separate area, but I mean, I used to be fascinated with them. My wife and I, when we met about 35 years ago, we both had a love of them, and so I used to use them and suggest them in clinical practice, of course. And at the time, I brought over a very famous Dr. Danielle Penuel out of France, and we did a 4-day workshop in Edmonton. And I just barely got enough people to pay for the whole thing. Today I could get 2,000 people to show up, but he's getting elderly and doesn't want to travel anymore. So, the idea is, yes, there's gaining of popularity. There is also a lot of multi-level marketing of essential oils on the internet, and some of it is very harmful, including suggesting to people that they take them internally. And that's not something for the amateur. And it disappoints me that companies are doing that. Yeah.
That has always scared me that they're just teaching these lay people to teach their people to take this stuff internally when it's not advisable at all.
I agree.
Right, frightening. Now, I understand that some of the essential oils cross the blood-brain barrier. Is that accurate? And what's the advantage of that?
Advantage and disadvantage. Yeah. Well, the reality is that some of them, for example, common sage has thuyon in it, and it's a neurotoxin. I mean, so you don't want to be doing that. And then there are other compounds that are in frankincense, apparently, that actually cross the blood-brain barrier. And some people claim it has some benefits for gliomas and other brain cancers. I have no personal knowledge of that, but I do know that essential oils, there's many ways to take them. You can smell them orally. You get some benefits that way because they affect the olfactory nerves, which then affect the hypothalamus, pituitary, that whole cascade of hormonal endocrine. And I think that's great. Taking them internally, not a great idea. But some people, particularly in France, out of the French tradition, they will actually take and use them rectally. And that bypasses the liver. And therefore, you get the benefit without the liver immediately freaking out and detoxifying these oils. And so, we need more people who are well trained in medical aromatherapy in North America, no question about it. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but some regulation, some regulation so that things that are actually harmful are not recommended by companies selling the product.
Oh, I know. I run into people all the time that go, oh, well, I don't worry. When I get a cold, I just take some oregano oil. And I say, you mean internally? And they go, yeah. And I say, well, that's not a great idea. If you want to get the benefit, just rub the oregano oil on the bottom of your feet. And then 10 minutes later, you'll have breath like a pizza, and you'll get all the benefit of it without harming yourself.
So they also use, I know, like you just brought up, essential oils on the reflex points on the bottom of the feet. Is that effective?
Well, I think it's another technique. I mean, both hands and the feet do have these reflex points, and sort of like, essential oil to your acupuncture points. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't think it's necessarily the most effective, right? Yeah.
So, how can this is a common problem? How can an herbalist avoid being accused of practicing medicine without a license?
Well, we are. Herbalists are practicing without a license. I mean, the bottom line is that we're not ever given the opportunity to have our own colleges. I'm a professional member, or have been for about 20 some years, a professional member of the American Herbalist Guild, which is, a highly esteemed organization that promotes the safe use of herbal medicine. But, in some states it's illegal, fortunately in Canada, we are allowed to use herbs. That goes way back to the Magna Carta, if you can believe it, to the British North American Act, where actually herbalists were given permission back, what is that, 800 years ago, something like that. And in Canada, even though they are restricting to some degree what is available in health food stores, if you are a practicing herbalist, you are able to grow or harvest and prepare your own herbal medicines for your own client. And so that's a step that is true in Canada, and it's not always true in every state. I know that. Yeah.
Amazing. So, how can you tell when a person's condition is well beyond the scope of herbal medicine?
Oh, well, I've called people a taxi who had appendicitis and said, here you go. I mean, really, the bottom line is there are different ways and techniques. I used to look at the iris of the eye, they call it iridology, and tongue diagnosis, pulse diagnosis out of the traditional Chinese medicine. All of those are very valuable tools to give you an idea of what is the root cause, and instead of just trying to treat the acute, which could be a headache or something like that. I mean, I would say about 8% of the people who came into my clinical practice and their main complaint was headaches, more than half of them got remedied by drinking more water.
There's that.
Like sometimes sensibility has to take over. So yeah.
Trade out that diet pop and have a glass of water.
I had somebody with diet pop, they were drinking 8 a day and were suffering epileptic type seizure.
Oh my.
And when they stopped drinking them, they all went away.
Was it diet or was it sugar?
I think it was diet. It was the aspartame.
Oh, I know that can be nar.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I would need to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission in life?
Hmm.
To educate people how to take care of themselves.
Well, that's simple. It's a beautiful mission because we need to take care of ourselves. I think we've stepped back and turned over our power to a system that isn't really designed to manage us, don't you?
You have to be your own physician. You have to be responsible for making decisions about your own health and not just give it up to someone else. And one of the hard parts about that is that sometimes it takes a little bit of education and a little bit of search, but it's well worth it in the end, because then you can feel confident that you've taken care of yourself.
And who could be more of an authority on your body than the one that lives in it?
Exactly. I agree with you.
So, do you have a medical referral team that understands herbology?
Do I have a which, sorry?
A medical referral team that understands herbology well enough that you can refer back and forth at this point?
Not any longer. I haven't had clinical practice for about 20 years. I now strictly do a lot of research, writing books, and like to attend conferences and places where I can share my experience with people about, you know, what the last 50 years have been like. So I don't, at the present time, I just moved to a small town, don't have a referral system. So, but, you know, in many of the larger centers, there are groups of individuals who seek out and they find doctors, medical doctors who are more empathetic to looking at a more natural, holistic approach. And I think that's important. Yeah.
I'm with you. So, how do you see natural health, such as herbology and coming together? And the regular system coming together. How does that look to you?
Well, people have often asked me that, and I said before I spent a lot of years trying to do some integration. The present biomedical model that we have is super expensive. Hospital costs and the whole apparatus, the machinery, the drugs, everything is super expensive, and it will eventually collapse upon itself.
I think it's in the process of doing that, isn't it?
It is. And so your community herbalist might be your best bet, especially treating conditions before they get really chronic and serious, like finding ways to eat properly, to look at what you can take in, not just physically, but what you take in terms of emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, like how you are able to bring into yourself the inner wisdom that has always been there.
And it goes full circle. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your considerable wisdom.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Been a real pleasure. Our guest this hour has been Robert Rogers, the author of over 60 books. His latest, Medicinal Lichens, Traditional Knowledge, and Modern Pharmacology. To find out more about Robert, where you can find his many books and all he has to offer, visit his website, selfhealdistributing.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit our website, www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join me right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.